Our next guest, one of my favorite people who I look forward to seeing each year at the National Sports Media Association Awards weekend. Play-by-play for CBS, Westwood One, the Brooklyn Nets, and he's going to have to unmute his own mic if he will. Ian Eagle. Ian, thank you for being here.
Hey, John, you got me?
Got you loud and clear. I was not worried about you in the technical. My wife asked me, is Ian going to be okay? I said, yeah, the people I'm not at all worried about.
John, two things. First of all, thank you so much. Very honored to be part of the STAA Summit. And secondly, I just want to be as open and honest as possible. I completely misread your email. I was under the impression this was a Zoom virtual cocktail hour. So I'm going to have to adjust on the fly, but we'll make it work. Thanks.
Very good. I appreciate it. We can turn it into a Zoom virtual cocktail hour after we're finished.
It will be later on. I can confirm that for me personally.
If you would, please I keep saying 30 seconds to all the guests, but when you get to where you guys are, it takes longer than that. But if you would recap how your career, so people can kind of have an idea of the paths various people take from square one to where you are now.
Well, I had an interest in doing this at the age of 8 and told my parents as such. And both my parents told me that is what you will do. They were very encouraging. It was very empowering to hear that. So from the age of 8 on, I just believed I would do this. And a lot of it was probably naivete. I didn't do anything about it until I got to college, which was Syracuse University. Went there because of the long lineage of sports broadcasters and the fact that Marty Glickman had gone there and Bob Costas and Dick Stockton and Len Berman and Marv Albert. Yes, that was the reason why I wanted to be a part of it. So got to Syracuse, got involved very early, got involved in as many different aspects of the business as I could, both radio and television, and worked my way up and took my lumps and understood that it wasn't going to be easy and it was going to be a challenge. And there was a lot of competition at Syracuse. There were a lot of people that had the same aptitude for it and the same passion for it. Got offered a couple of jobs coming out of college to be on the air, one in Buffalo, one in West Virginia, rolled the dice, took a job behind the scenes as a producer at WFAN radio in New York because ultimately I knew I wanted to be in my hometown. So I took that risk to be behind the scenes and hopefully get my foot in the door. Was told definitively, do not take this job if you want to be on the air, but I took it anyway with the idea that they'll get to know me and familiarity will be my friend, and eventually got on the air. And from there, took advantage of a number of different opportunities that came my way, tried to connect well with people, tried to improve as a broadcaster each step along the way, and also remained a student of this. You're always a student of this. You're never a finished product. So that mentality of still evolving, learning, and trying to be the best broadcaster that I could be is still part of my philosophy today.
Let's start the questioning with Ryan Smith. Ryan, thank you for being here. Please state your affiliation and your question for the Birdman, Ian Eagle.
Yes. So, hi, Ian. My name is Ryan. Thank you for doing this and Ian for coming on. So I do some freelance in the area, play-by-play for Raleigh, North Carolina area, some PA as well. So my question to you essentially is, I'm kind of new at this and I haven't done it for all that long. So as I'm building relationships, as I'm networking and developing my voice, if you will, people talk about developing your voice. What would you say are some best tips to develop your voice, and how can I do that consistently?
Yeah, the great question, Ryan. The big reminder here, I think we get caught up oftentimes in the minutia of this, but this job requires a combination of preparation and performance. The preparation part, I think we all understand how much work goes into getting ready for these games, assignments, whatever part of the business you've chosen. The performance part is sometimes overlooked, and that requires a lot of self-assessment. It requires you to listen to others and to take either physical notes or mental notes of what you like, what you don't like, and really get to the point where you are fully engaged in the process. You have to be willing to get onto a microphone or in front of a camera and realize that it's not as simple as, all right, I've learned all the information. You have to get there and emote. So a big key of the way I've always viewed this is, look, you have to be authentic. If you're trying to do an impression of a broadcaster, eventually that's not going to work, because when you're on the air for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or doing a 2-minute report or a talk show or a sideline hit, eventually the essence of you has to come out and has to be in the forefront. So authenticity is a big key, but the other part of the equation is you have to be interesting. You have to be an interesting person. I don't think that viewers and listeners want robots. They don't want machines. They want humans. They want relatability. But it means that you have to be well-versed in many different topics, not just the one topic that you might be dealing with on that particular broadcast. Because when the game is out of hand, what else do you have? Is there something that people that are watching or listening can latch on to and keeps them watching or listening? In terms of the performance part, developing your voice, that's trial and error. And that requires you sometimes to go outside your comfort zone and understanding that you've got to try some things, see where the range of your voice is. Don't just settle for, well, this is as far or as high as I can get. How far can you go with pushing yourself on the performance side of it? And that might be as simple as doing something in your own shower, as silly as that might sound. Good acoustics, by the way, very good acoustics. But making sure that you're a full voice. And when you go up, can you sustain it? That's something that comes with a lot of repetition. And I will tell you again that it's not ever a finished product. You're always trying to find the best range for you. My range at a football game in an open air stadium with 70,000 people might be different than my range, my vocal range at a basketball game with 18,000 people and a closed environment. You have to be aware of these things and you have to react accordingly.
Let's go to Matthew Branch. Thanks for hanging in there, Matt. Go ahead and state your affiliation and your question for Ryan, please.
All right, I'm Matthew Branch. I am the student director of the Ouachita Sports Digital Network at Ouachita Baptist University in Arkansas. I know you mentioned you were a producer of a radio show, and you said you've done some stuff behind the scenes. So how important is it to do other stuff other than just practice broadcasting? Like, is it just as important to know how to run a camera, know how to direct, and know the other aspects that make a production going into the booth?
Yeah, Matthew, this is again from my personal experience. So I don't want to say this and just assume that it's a blanket way for everybody to approach it. But for me, it was really important. It gave me a perspective on what everybody does. And it gave me a sense of collaboration. And it's the same tenets that I use today. Because when you work on a television broadcast, it's not about you as the announcer. It's about your analyst. It's about your sideline reporter. It's about your statistician. It's about your spotter, your audio person, your producer, your director. It's about camera people. It's about the totality of the group. It's the collaboration of the broadcast. So for me to do the best job that I can do, I think it's really important that I have an understanding of what everybody does. I make sure I go into the truck before the game or after the game if time permits. On a radio broadcast, I make sure that I know not just the names of the people that I'm working with, an engineer or a stat person in a given town, but their background, asking them questions. This is true both on the air and off the air. You want to be good at this job? You've got to be curious. You've got to be naturally curious. That means that you have to actually be interested in what other people have to say. And maybe it's something that you store away for later. You don't know when you're going to use that information, but making sure that I'm part of the team has been of the utmost priority for me throughout my career. And how it worked for me on the radio side, by osmosis, I learned a great deal. So I started in May of 1990. I graduated May 10th. I started the job May 13th. I didn't get officially on the air until September of 91. They gave me a few assignments here and there to go out, cover a New Jersey Devils game or a local event and call in with a quick voicer or get tape after the game going into the locker room. But they gave me my first shot on the air as an update anchor in September of 91. So you're talking about a year and change that went by where I was a sponge. I took everything in, and I learned so much from just being a fly on the wall, being in the control room for Howie Rose, who was the talk show host, now the voice of the New York Mets, from 7 to midnight at WFAN radio, or being in the newsroom when Mike and the Mad Dog, the preeminent sports show in New York, were on the air and would, during their breaks, come into the newsroom just to chew the fat, just to talk. Watching update anchors prepare for their updates was immeasurable experience for me because I saw it with my own two eyes. And it gave me a real leg up in the next stage of my career because I had this knowledge that I just didn't have prior to it. And that was based on being a producer and not necessarily being on the air.
Matthew, thank you for the question. I appreciate your being here. Let's go next to John Easter. John, thank you too. Please state your affiliation and your question for Ian.
Thank you, John, and thanks for this organization. Appreciate you and all you do. And Ian, I'm a big fan. I'm with WBDG at Ben Davis High School. I'm a high school teacher, actually. I've been doing this now for about 22 years, teaching kids about radio and broadcasting and things
Awesome.
like that. And that's my question for you is we get a lot of beginning broadcasters, and you've given some great tips. I'm, clicking away with notes and things here on the side. So what is your advice for a high school teacher, for someone who's teaching broadcasting right now? What would you say to us?
John, appreciate the question. Really a big fan of your holiday as well. Tremendous.
Thank you.
The first thing I would tell you is that there is so much available to students now than ever before. So what I mean by that, if you want to learn, the best way to learn to me is to do it, of course. The second best way to learn is to observe. And the amount of material that is out there, internet, television, radio, satellite radio, podcasts, you could spend your entire day consuming all of the different aspects of this business. News, sports, weather, it's all there all the time. There are channels dedicated to covering specific things. And if you have a very clear niche of what you're interested in, it's all there for you. So now it's one thing to watch or listen. It's another to do it with a critical eye and a critical ear. And that requires you to shift your thought process. Instead of just being a viewer or a listener, you've got to look at it and listen in a completely different way. You have to do it from the perspective that you're now trying to learn and trying to ensconce yourself in this field. And it does require everything you've got. So I realized very early that I wanted to do this. I paid attention to it at a young age, the nuances of it, as simple as how a broadcaster goes to break, or how a broadcaster welcomes back an audience from a commercial, a toss from the studio to the site, little things that you just take for granted as a viewer or a listener, that now when you shift your thought process, you realize, oh, wow, there's an art to this. There's a method to it. And when I changed my thought process, it changed everything. When I was an intern at WFAN Radio in between my junior and senior year of college, we had one of the days, it was a 3-day internship per week, and one of the days was a little slow. I was in the newsroom, I would take in feeds, occasionally I would cut some tape. I know that a lot of the younger people right now that are a part of this have no idea what I'm talking about, but literally, physically, you would cut tape and paste it together to create these audio files for the update anchors or the talk show hosts to use. And during the downtime, there were media guides set up at WFAN Radio for every team in all of the 4 major sports. And I would take that time and leaf through the media guides, not necessarily looking up the entire roster of the Montreal Expos, but studying the biography of the broadcasters, where they went to college, what their first job was out of college, their path, their road to where they eventually ended up. And I did it for all 4 leagues, every team. Nobody told me to do it. It was an instinctual thing because I wanted to know more about the business. I had a thirst for knowledge. And that was a way to satisfy my thirst, learning about a position that I ultimately wanted to be in. So as someone like yourself, John, now teaching, it's multi-level and it's multifaceted. They can learn so much from just calling up on the internet a game, an event that they can go back and watch, or a report that they would like to see, or how something was covered, and then implementing what they learn into their own practices. If they have a mirror and if they have a brush, you can have a mini studio in your house, looking in the mirror, talking into your brush, getting to the point where you're confident in that dynamic. Right now with computers, what we're doing right now, I've got a camera, I'm staring into it. I can get reps every day just by doing this, exercises. Practice is important. Practice doesn't always make perfect. Practice can often make permanent. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing what you do and going to someone like yourself that can help you along in the process and help you improve during the evolution.
Ian, it's cool. Somebody that we both know, you had shared that history of yours about researching the backgrounds of all the pro sports play-by-play broadcasters. They are now doing that because you gave them the idea. So you kind of paid it forward, maybe without even realizing you were. Yeah. That's pretty neat. Yeah, Jordan Spurgeon, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for hanging in there, man. You've been there a while. But go ahead with your affiliation and your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for everything you're doing. And Ian, thank you for coming on and talking to us today. So I'm currently a junior at Arizona State University, so over at Walter Cronkite, and I'm actually a transfer student from a different college in California, so community college first. So I've done multiple different things, radio, TV, play-by-play. For what you're talking about today, I'm kind of trying to grasp everything you said because you told us a lot so far. What's sort of the best way to figure out who you are? Because I had a saying at my old college where at first starting out, they'd call it case, which was copy and steal everything. You sponge in everything from all the pros, and then you kind of start forming your own thing. Like on radio, I've been told very similar to the way Colin Cowherd does things, which I don't always agree with, but I can see where people get that, and I form my own way. What's the best way to sort of form your own way so that you can show who you are? Because I know who I am. I just need to be able to showcase that more often. Yeah,
Jordan, appreciate it. I have hair envy, by the way. Very impressive.
Thank you.
Beautiful flow, beautiful mane.
Thank you.
I think this is a really interesting part of the business because when it's performance related, the first thing we tend to do is copy or imitate because we're working from ground zero. Nobody comes out of the womb as a broadcaster. You develop what you like, what you don't like. You synthesize in your mind what you think you should be doing. And then, of course, natural talent kicks in at some point. So when I started doing this, there is no doubt about it. I was doing an imitation of Marv Albert. Anyone that grew up in the New York area as a sports fan was used to that. And I think somewhere during my sophomore year of college, I began to understand that, no, I have my own voice and I want to use my own voice and I want to figure out a way to distinguish myself. But when I got put into certain situations, I would kick back in. It was just an odd exercise. And I would often just go back to that safe place. It probably was not until my senior year of college that I really started gaining some confidence in who I was and in my own style. I think when we start out in this business, there's one hurdle that you initially want to get over. And that is that if you're on the radio or if you're on television, you don't want someone that's watching or listening to say, what the hell is this person doing on here? Like, they don't belong. They don't belong. So there's a tendency to feel as if you want to sound or look like everybody else because that's already been accepted. And then once you get to that stage that you are on the air, you realize, no. I don't want to sound like everybody else. I want to be me. And I want the essence of me to come through in everything that I do. And that's a big step. So I can't tell you that, oh, snap your fingers, that's going to happen. It takes obviously a lot of the exercise of doing it. And then it also takes a lot of self-reflection. You cannot be embarrassed. You cannot be tentative in watching or listening to your stuff. You've got to do it, and you've got to be productive about it. And yes, it's important to get other opinions, but you can't get 1,000 other opinions either. You've got to find a close-knit group of people who you respect and then take from that what they tell you and try to apply it. And here's the key. You need to keep doing more broadcasts. So I don't know what year you're in at Arizona State. The hope is you still have some time.
Yeah,
And
I've got 3 semesters left.
Yeah, well, 3 semesters is good. That means that you're going to have a chance to do more and more and more and work at it. It does require effort, and I don't want to downplay this part of it. It's a really important part of the process for broadcasters of trying to find their style, their way. Look, I'm sure you've already heard it before today. It still has to be you. I love what Colin Cowherd does as a talk show host. He makes you think. You may not agree with everything that he says, but he has a way of doing it, sometimes in a provocative manner. Sometimes it's just down the middle and hits you right in the eyes. You can take aspects of what he does, but you still have to make it your own.
Jordan, thank you for the question. You are one of many Sun Devils I've seen here in the summit today. I appreciate you guys, so thank you for that. Let's go to John Persos. Big John, you've been showing the patience of Job, so thank you for hanging in. State your affiliation, if you would, and your question for Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'm a grad student at New York Tech on Long Island, and for the past 2 years, I've done play-by-play for every home game for every sport while being a full-time grad student. So my question is, in the preparation process, what's the difference in your preparation process preparing for a Nets game on Yes versus preparing for a national game?
Yeah, John, the prep is always an intriguing aspect of this because you could talk to 100 different broadcasters and you would get 100 different answers as to how they prepare, how they're able to compartmentalize the information. For me, I can't leave things to the end. I need to get a head start. So on a local broadcast with the Nets, look, I'm going to have a very high level of knowledge and familiarity with the team that I'm covering. So it's really about the daily housekeeping of staying on top of the storylines, talking to people affiliated with the team that can help, and making sure that my crew, my group, is as informed as possible when the game starts. The opponent, which we understand, I'm not doing the game for the Timberwolves audience or the Grizzlies audience, but in this day and age, you have to understand your broadcasts are going everywhere. So you better have a strong working knowledge, and you better be able to educate your audience on the team that the Nets are playing. So that requires a lot of work. And I've got it down to a bit of a science where I can do the Nets opponent in probably 5 to 6 hours, whether that's one day or spread out over 2 days. And that's soup to nuts. An example, I have a couple of charts from the last college game that I did, and the same applies. It's all by hand. This is what makes me comfortable. I would never tell anybody this is the way you have to do it. You have to do it the way that makes you comfortable. This is how the information gets from either a computer or a book or a magazine to my notes to my head. And that's University of Florida. I had Florida against Kentucky as my last game for CBS before everything shut down. So what's going to be on there? The obvious things are on there for me: height, weight, hometown, what year they're in, what their numbers are, what high school they went to, and then we're going to get a little more specific with each player. We're going to dig down deep in Ashton Hagen's material and Emmanuel Quickly and Tyrese Maxey and EJ Montgomery and Nick Richards. And I have it set up: point guard, two guard, small forward, power forward, center. We know that basketball has become a bit positionless, as we know. For a national game, I've got to view it that I'm parachuting in. I don't have the same day-to-day knowledge that the fans may have. So that means I've got to go some broad strokes, and then I've got to get into the weeds, and I've got to get up to date. Something that will bother me as a viewer is if a broadcaster pops in and it's game 23 of the season, and they're still focused on a lot of material that would have been important early in the season. So because it's the first time they're seeing them, I'm making a conscious effort to keep the audience in mind. I'm doing this for an audience. You have to respect the viewer. You have to respect the listener. So it's about currency, and it's about something that's a little different. And how do you separate yourself? Well, you talk to coaches. You talk to the SID. You find material that hasn't necessarily been in the newspapers. It's understood that you know everything that's been covered that week in the newspapers, or the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks. That goes without saying. That's rudimentary. How do you get a little deeper? And how do you find some nuggets that will be fresh? Football, similar mentality. This is from the divisional playoff game. This is Tennessee offense, Tennessee defense, Baltimore offense, Baltimore defense, master with notes that I've accumulated throughout the week. I've had people walk into the booth saying, I can't read that. I said, well, fortunately, you don't have to. I do. I'm the only one that has to be able to read it. So that's, again, the important part of being able to find what you need when you need it. How much of this do I actually use in a broadcast? If the game's good, 10%. 12%. If the game is not good, the number goes up. We'll have meetings with the two teams. I'll take those meetings and break them down into a digestible form that I can use while I'm on the air. Baltimore Ravens meetings, John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram. Tennessee Titans meetings, Mike Vrabel, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry. This is what can separate you when you're on the air. Not just calling the plays, but can you get a little bit deeper, and can you keep it informative and entertaining? That combination. That's what people are looking for. They want to be informed and they want to be entertained.
Matthew Owens, you are now under center. Go ahead and state your affiliation, please, and your question for Ryan.
Hi, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to everyone for putting this on. I have this very unique situation, if you want to call it that, of going to a high school and a college with no sports. So I guess I'm kind of behind the game with not being able to do any sports and any announcing in high school and college. But I am at Learfield IMG now as a producer. So what would you say would be the next step for me to get from point A, where I'm at, doing nothing in high school or college, but now trying to get from being a producer at IMG to play-by-play? So,
Matthew, I assume with your situation at Learfield IMG, there are studios that are available to you?
yes, there is.
I would take whatever time I have left over after my shift as a producer, and I would go into the studio and I would record an update or an opening. And I would continue to do it every time I have a shift. I would just consider my shift 45 more minutes longer than it normally is. That's one thing that I did during that interim at WFAN Radio when I got hired as a producer and didn't get on the air officially until 16 months after that, 17 months after that. I would go back to the studio and I would record an update. Nobody told me to do it. I just felt that it was important to stay in that mindset. And if the facilities are available to you and you know the subject matter because you're producing, then it shouldn't be all that difficult. And from there, you can build a tape. And after building a tape, then you can feel strong and confident that the tape is representative of what you're capable of. Someone is going to hire you based on potential at this point as an on-air announcer. And it has to be a combination of not just your tape, but who you are and wowing somebody potentially in an interview or in your back and forth via email. And the other piece of advice I would give you when sending emails and reaching out to people, I wouldn't write an opus. I would get to the point. One of the great things right now is that you can basically contact anybody. It doesn't mean they're going to get back to you, but people are now more available than ever before because you can find them via email or via a website, and you can introduce yourself. It doesn't mean that you're always going to get a response, but you can put your toe in the pool and you can engage with decision makers more so than ever before. It used to be you'd have to go to the post office, send your tape, hope it got to the person. Maybe it sat on their desk for a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year. There would be dirt accumulating on it. And you think to yourself, will this person ever watch this tape? I have no idea. I don't even know who the person is. I'm hoping they watch or listen. And now we're in a different part of the world where you can connect with people. So Matthew, my advice more than anything else is you have to go do it. You've got to go do it. You've got the means to do it. You've got to actually do it. And then get to a point where you feel the tape best represents what you're capable of.
Fabulous. Matthew, thank you for the question and for being here. Also, thank you to Reese Levin for being here and for waiting patiently. You're up. Step up to the mic, Reese, and tell us your affiliation and your question for Ian, please.
Hi, John. Hi, Ian. Thanks so much for getting together and doing this. I'm a junior at the University of Maryland, and I remember reading something or listening to a podcast where you're like so busy during the football and basketball seasons where you're doing boards for games that are like weeks down the line. So my question is, how do you manage your time so well you're able to do so much work in a limited amount of time? Because that's like one thing I struggle with is doing work in general, whether it's early on or procrastinating it. So how do you manage your time so well?
Yeah, Reese, thanks. Good to see Larry Fitzgerald as well. Very active and still part of the NFL. Reese, it's a big challenge, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's probably the most difficult part of the job for me, but the most rewarding. I still like the preparation. I like learning about the players and the coaches. I like the storylines. I enjoy that aspect of it. So it's more of a time management issue more than anything else. I like the process. It's a matter of being smart, and it's a matter of being efficient. Look, I'm going to tell all of you, it's really important to be well balanced. I have a very understanding wife. I have two very understanding kids. They get it. They've always got it. It's never been a distraction. And if anything, it has allowed me to do this because they know when I go into that office that I'm fully immersed in what I'm doing. But I still have to be around. I still have to be available. I still have to be a good husband and a good dad and a good friend to people. So you just really have to be smart. And it means sometimes waking up early and just spending your entire day dedicated to doing what needs to be done. I've figured some things out. I've streamlined through the years. There's no doubt about it. There were probably things that I spent a little too much time on for an extended period that I've pulled back on. There are things that maybe I didn't focus on nearly enough that I've now made more of a priority in my preparation. I must say doing it by hand probably costs me more time than it does save me time, but it's just what I'm comfortable with, and you've got to be comfortable. That's the other part of it. And it's a lot of you figuring out what you need, what you require to do a game well. All of the things that I showed you, all of the material, look, could I go do a game without it? I probably could. Would the game be as good? Would the broadcast be as good? It wouldn't. It just wouldn't. I know what it takes. I know what it requires to be prepared. But none of this material helps you in how you connect with your analyst and how you connect with your audience. That's a completely separate part of your brain that's working during a broadcast. And something that I've really put pride into is finding that chemistry with who I'm working with and making sure they're comfortable and making sure they're being put in the best positive light. Because if they're doing well, that usually means we're doing well. And if there's a connection between us, it normally resonates with an audience. TV viewers, radio listeners, they can tell. They can tell. You can't fool people over the course of a long period of time. If there's something real between the two of you in the booth or courtside or wherever you might be, rinkside or up in the stands in a press box, if that's real, then the audience can feel it.
Ian, thank you so much. I come across people regularly to whom you have given advice or mentored. So props to you for that, for your accessibility to young people in the industry and your accessibility to us to be here today. I appreciate it so much, man.
John, my pleasure. I am not on Twitter, as you know, officially. I do have a burner account, so I'm following along, and this has been fantastic. Truly, you're doing a great thing for all of the broadcasters, young and old, and my pleasure. Really, really pleased to be a part of it, and I'm going to be cracking this open momentarily.
Yeah, when you did that, at least 2 other people I saw held up bottles too. To salute you. Thank you, Ian.
Great to see everybody virtually. Hopefully I'll get to meet you down the road.